40% Merlot, 40% Malbec, and 20%
Sounds
Cab
good.
Sauv.
Tastes good for you.
Welcome to the Wine Enthusiast Podcast, the world in your glass.
This episode is brought to you by Blue Apron Wine. Yes, wine. If Blue Apron could make home cooking cool again, why not the Wine Club? Blue Apron only seeks out best-of-breed wines, including Uvaggio, a regular enthusiast editor's choice pick. Most other wine clubs just send you cheap reds and whites dressed up with fancy labels. Only Blue Apron Wine has some of the world's best winemakers working with them exclusively. Get $25 off your first shipment of 6 wines at blueapron.com/corkscrew. Layla Schlack, Senior Editor, Wine Enthusiast. Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. It's all about the food. Smells of sage and thyme and gravy fill the air, and the family gathers around the table for that familiar meal, accompanied by those familiar wines like Pinot Noir and Riesling that provide just enough acid and body to take a back seat to the food, really, if we're being honest. And I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel with Thanksgiving. I like those comforting foods. But sometimes it's nice to add a little excitement with a different slew of pairings. So this year, I talked to a couple of natural wine somms, a cicerone, a cider somm, and even a bartender to get the best ideas for how to pair different wines, or the same wines just from different regions, as well as cocktails, beer, cider, with that same old spread. I also asked them for a few tips for how to break the news to my family that we'd be enjoying different beverages this year. First, let's talk to Joe Campanelli, a partner at Fausto, a new restaurant in Brooklyn that focuses on natural wines.
I tend to think of Thanksgiving as a time for family and making other people happy. So I'm usually a little bit more conservative and serve some of the more traditional Pinot Noirs and Riesling style wines. Along with that, you can do some peripheral wines like Gamay, Beaujolais, or Gruner Veltliner if you want to get something a little bit more interesting. I also look at it as a time to clear out my cellar, some things that I think maybe some of the relatives would like to drink that I don't necessarily love to drink, or magnums it's always something that's super festive. The other thing about Thanksgiving is that you have so many different types of food, so that those kind of more classic pairings of Riesling and Pinot Noir are really great because they tend to have a lot of high acidity, pair with a vast variety of food and be crowd pleasers. But that also means, since you have so much different kinds of food, you can also have a lot of different kinds of wine too. So I like to bring out a lot of wine on the table, some that's more out there and esoteric, and always some wine that is really kind of down the middle and crowd pleasing. Yeah, the variety of food served at Thanksgiving is really all over the place. You have like turkey, which is really like lean and proteiny, and you have some food that has a lot of fat and food that has a lot of sweetness to it. So it's an old sommelier's adage that the acidity pairs well with everything. So high acid wines are go-to wines. If you need something that is going to be really versatile, moderate alcohol, high acid, white or red is really sort of the go-to in that. But I also feel like I think it's cool to have a lot of different kinds of wine so everyone can sort of have their favorite wine too. It should be an abundance, not just of food, but of wine choices.
Are there characteristics, obviously natural wine's a huge category, are there characteristics inherent in a lot of natural wines that makes them especially good pairings for Thanksgiving food?
Well, the kind of natural wine that I like tends to be natural wine that isn't on the extreme funky side of things. I like natural wines that are more elegant. So for me, it's important that the wine is made with reverence for nature, the people who work in the vineyards, and then ultimately tastes like it's wine, tastes like it's fruit. And I think the same way that if you buy a turkey from a local farm or a farmer's market, it's just going to be way more delicious than if you buy an industrially produced turkey at your supermarket, wine that is made by hand, that is made in an artisan style and with a minimal amount of chemicals is also just going to be more delicious. But I also feel like it's really important that the wines aren't super funky or obviously faulty in any sort of way. So I tend to stay away from wines that are like no sulfur added whatsoever wines, especially at Thanksgiving, where relatives are sort of notoriously less adventurous than the wine enthusiasts who might be listening to in the podcast. So I think it's important that the wine is clean, it tastes like wine, it's beautiful, it has purity and clarity, but at the same time, it's really made in a natural way.
So here's the tough part. If you had to just pick one red, one white, that's what you're pouring. You've got to please your more traditional family members, but it's also something you're going to want to drink. What are you serving?
So I had to just pick one red and one white. It for sure would be a Pinot Noir for the red, and I would choose a coastal California Pinot Noir, one that is under 14% alcohol and doesn't show any signs of new oak. Something like Tyler Pinot Noir has been our go-to. It's really high tone, high acid, and so it can stand up to the cranberry sauce or the gravy or the stuffing, and people who are wine enthusiasts can tell this is like just a really high quality wine, but also has enough fruit that people who just want a delicious Pinot Noir would be able to enjoy it. And I guess I'm boring, and I would go with the Riesling, because Riesling I also feel like is the white wine that wine enthusiasts, sommeliers, people who love wine so much really are into, and also people who maybe aren't as sophisticated, like a little bit of that sweetness. So I think that might be the great equalizer wine, but I'm certainly not the first person to say that. And we have some really cool older Rieslings that have a ton of complexity and aren't nearly as expensive as older Burgundy, for instance, which I would love, but I can't really afford, or I don't know if it would be wasted on the majority of family members. So. Yeah, and then just the little sweetness in an off-dry Riesling would be great with things like, again, the cranberry sauce, or if there's a sweeter mashed potato or sweet potato thing. Those things kind of tend to clobber most wines, but a good 9% alcohol Riesling with great acidity and a lot of flavor can stand up to them nicely.
Are you pouring anything specific as an aperitif when people start arriving before they're sitting at the table?
So we're going to have a really great selection of vermouths for aperitif. I've been trying to get people to drink more vermouth for a long time. On its own, I think it's just a really lovely pre-dinner drink. It has a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of bitterness. It's low in alcohol, again, so you can drink a lot. I like that. Yeah, so that's kind of what we'll be pushing. I hope that people will continue to do it. I've also found that there are a lot of really wonderful bitters and aperitifs that have started to come out, both ones that hadn't been imported from Italy before and are domestically produced. And what I like about this new batch of bitters is that they tend to be colored and flavored with natural ingredients, and not with red food dye. And I think that's pretty cool.
I'm glad you said that. That's also my plan. I love bitters especially, but also vermouths. Do you have any specific brands that you're really into right now?
There's a few brands that I really love. Skurnik Wines has quite a few of them, like Contratto. Contratto bitter is a little bit on the sweeter side for a bitter, but it's really delicious and I think flavored with beet juice, and their aperitif is really, really wonderful as well. This one called Brutto Americano. Cappelletti is really wonderful. Yeah, there's quite a few. I can't think of any others off the top of my head.
Those are all good ones. And what are you drinking with your pumpkin pie and your apple pie and your vanilla ice cream for dessert?
Well, with pumpkin pie, apple pie, vanilla ice cream, I really actually like Madeira. I feel like it's so American, so deeply rooted in our history, and Thanksgiving is such an American holiday. That's also why I would prefer the California Pinot Noir, by the way, over maybe Burgundy, though I would never turn down a really good Burgundy. But I think if you're someone who likes to have cheese after dinner like I am, orange wines are really excellent with cheese. Depending, obviously, it's quite a large group. So I would check out some Madeira. I think it's cool and very historic.
Let's talk about Thanksgiving leftovers. the next day when you're making your turkey sandwich or you're waffling your leftover stuffing or whatever you do the next day, and you don't have to please your entire family and you can drink whatever you want with these traditional Thanksgiving flavors, what are you pouring then?
Well, first, if we had anything left over, say we had some Beaujolais and I corked it and put it in the refrigerator overnight, some like chilled Beaujolais with turkey sandwich is really delicious. But if I were to open up something for leftovers, great Burgundy, like just sinking into it, really enjoying it and saying, wow, I did my duty with the family yesterday. It was great. And now I'm really going to enjoy the wine that I love the most. Though it's never a slog to get through a bottle of Tyler Pinot Noir because I love that. It's really delicious. Yeah, and I guess one other wine that I forgot that is crowd-pleasing and I also love is champagne. Is good grower champagne on the drier style. That is something that pairs with everything, especially if you're a family that likes to do like appetizers before you sit down. It's really festive and fun. It gets people in a good mood and pairs with any of those little like finger foods and appetizers before you sit down. So a really good bottle of, I'd say usually a grower champagne, because they tend to be really good values too.
Great. Thanks so much and happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving.
Hi, I'm Max Bakker and I'm a Master Cicerone. So this year I'll definitely have plenty of beer on my table. Maybe even a little cider and maybe even a little spiked seltzer or hard seltzer.
So what are some of the challenges of pairing beer with the traditional, turkey, cranberry sauce, stuffing, gravy, green bean casserole? What are some of the challenges and also some of the strengths of beer versus wine or a soft drink?
Some of the challenges, you want to watch out for some of the smoked flavors with some of the beers that have a lot of phenolic flavors, so clove and allspice, cumin. Those kind of clash with smoke flavors. But with the sweetness of beer, pairs well with a lot of the sweet flavors of the meat, so caramel, biscuity, toast, a little burnt. And then there's lots of, call them the Scarborough Fair flavors of Thanksgiving, so parsley, sage, rosemary, thyme. Those are so complementary to our hops and beer that it makes for a wonderful time.
A lot of people think that beer can be very filling, and so a lot of people shy away from serving it at a big meal. What are some ways to kind of avoid that effect, or to even just assuage people that they can drink beer and still eat their full plate of Thanksgiving food?
Beer being filling is a huge misconception. I think one of the most important things is to pour beer out into the proper glassware. We really have to break the carbonation out of the beer into the glass. That's going to allow the aromatics to reach your nose. It's also going to assist with cutting through some of the richness of Thanksgiving food, but the right glass and the right beer will totally mitigate it being filling for you.
And would you also recommend doing maybe a smaller pour? Like, don't try to pour that whole bottle into a pint glass, but go for, an 8-ounce maybe?
Definitely right size. So, it's going to be it's a long day of eating and enjoying beverages. So 6 to 8 ounces with each course or with each pint, or even smaller, is perfect.
And do you also serve beer with your pies for dessert?
Of course. So beer shares a lot of similar properties with baking or dry cooking. So you get all the Maillard effect from the crust, sweet, caramel, nutty, toast. And there's a lot of beers that have similar flavors. And there's a lot of beers that have roasty flavors that it's almost like having a cup of coffee with your pie in the form of a nice, stout. Makes a perfect pairing.
And what about to greet your guests when they come in? Are you going to stick with a lighter beer then, or maybe something a little more exciting?
Definitely you want to stick and follow an intensity of the day. You want to go with lighter beers, lower alcohol, lower flavors as you reach up to the culmination of dessert. So there's lots of flavors to enjoy throughout the day in Thanksgiving, and you want to make sure that your palate's not fatigued.
And then what about the day after Thanksgiving when you've got your leftovers and you're making your turkey and stuffing sandwich? Are you still going to stick with something lighter? Are you going to maybe go a little funkier now that you don't have to please your whole family and kind of stick it out through the whole meal with everyone?
So I usually end Thanksgiving with a bigger beer, lots of intensity, lots of flavor and alcohol. And the next day it's going to start off with a run for sure, and then leftovers, and then again another beer that's very sessionable, lighter, kind of gets you back on the right track of the prior gluttony from the day before. So.
All right, great. Thanks so much. This episode is brought to you by Blue Apron Wine. Yes, wine. Awesome wine, in fact. In a head-to-head taste test of several wine clubs, Bloomberg recently wrote, Blue Apron is the clear winner, way more sophisticated in taste. Just as Blue Apron doesn't compromise on the quality of ingredients in their meal boxes, Blue Apron Wine only works with incredible vineyards and winemakers, such as Vengi in Napa, Mount Beautiful in New Zealand, and regular enthusiast high scorer Uvaggio. Every amazing wine is just $10 per bottle. Get $25 off your first shipment at blueapron.com/corkscrew. Terms and conditions apply. All orders are handled by Blue Apron Wine, Napa, California.
Jason Hedges, bar director at Gotham Bar and Grill. So I'm going to be serving what my guests ask for. I'm going to be working that evening, so I will be serving many different drinks, mostly, hopefully, cocktails. When people have Thanksgiving dinner, I think a lot of times there's an inclination to go towards wine. I'm finding these days that I think there's more of an adventurous drinker that's perhaps more interested in cocktails.
When you're doing Thanksgiving dinner here at Gotham, what do you see people drinking? You know, what cocktails are people ordering?
Thanksgiving dinner, the traditional one is a turkey with stuffing and mashed potatoes. It can be a little bit on the, I wouldn't say bland side, but, turkey and potatoes, they, let's say, can make a nice platform for adding flavors. So I think that's why cranberries or cranberry sauce is a nice addition to the meal, because it gives a little bit of a bitter and sweet quality to some of the more benign flavors. So I think that would work well in a cocktail also. So what I would probably do is make a cranberry syrup by just basically taking equal parts sugar and water and boiling it and adding some cranberries. It could be either fresh cranberries or frozen ones. And then I would let it boil for a couple minutes and come to room temperature, and then I'd strain the syrup out and maybe just leave some of the cranberries soaking in sugar to use as garnish. So with a syrup like this, you can do kind of anything. I think it's a nice flavor for a Thanksgiving meal, and you could make a drink with, say, America's native spirit, whiskey. So you can do basically a whiskey sour variation, I think, with a little lemon juice that would provide the backbone, and the acid would help pull out some of the flavors of the meal. And then the cranberry syrup would give texture and then some nice sweet and sour notes. And the bourbon, or the whiskey, I would probably use Michter's Rye. It's got some nice peppery notes. And that would just, I think, add a little bit of spice. So this kind of drink, for me, would be a great way to enjoy a meal.
That sounds delicious and very diplomatically put about some of the less exciting flavors on the Thanksgiving table. Are there any gin-based cocktails or vodka cocktails for people who aren't whiskey drinkers that you can recommend?
Yeah, for sure. At the restaurant here, I currently have a drink on the menu called A Touch of Honey, and I think this drink would work really nicely with a Thanksgiving dinner. It's a chamomile tea-infused botanist gin. It has some honey syrup, Pierre Ferrand's dry curacao, and a spoon of fig jam. And so I basically, it's a shake and drink, and it's served topped off with a sparkling wine from Long Island called Intime. And this is a really interesting sparkling wine. It's in the Liqueur d'Exposition. Fresh ginger is included. It gives it a really unique flavor. So I think these flavors work really nicely. You have ginger, figs, honey. These are all kind of like autumn flavors for me, and I think would work really nicely with a Thanksgiving dinner.
So both of these drinks kind of reflect the flavors that are going to be in the meal, right? They're warming spices. They're, ginger and cinnamon. Would you ever go in the opposite direction and do something like spicy and mezcal just to completely contrast the meal? Or is that something that is a little too crazy for such a traditional dinner? Would it wipe out the food completely?
I like getting a little creative and going outside of the box. So when pairing drinks with food, a lot of times a common technique is something called mirroring. So you want to basically take similar flavor profiles in the food and match the drink with that. But yeah, I think that there's also a way to contrast the flavors that works. I mean, you don't want to like overpower one flavor. I think what we're trying to do when pairing a beverage, whether it be wine, cocktail, spirits with food, is to enhance, so that one enhances the other, and they kind of make the experience that much more enjoyable. Mezcal is a spirit that's close to my heart. I love it. Using the right modifiers and taming some of those flavors, I think it could be really nice. But again, I don't want to do something that's going to upset the harmony of the experience, the flavor experience.
Do you have an aperitif you'd recommend for Thanksgiving dinner when people are first arriving, or when, before the main event starts?
Yeah, sure. To start off, it might be nice to have, I like Lillet Blanc, I think is really very nice. There's Cardamaro is something that I'm very, very fond of. And Bonal, it's a quinine-based liqueur. These are wine-based drinks. I think they're low alcohol. There's a good amount of like bitterness and acidity to just get the palate ready for a nice meal.
And what are you drinking with your apple pie and your pumpkin pie and your vanilla ice cream and whatever else is coming out for dessert?
So at that point, I'm basically ready for coffee. So I would probably do an espresso-based drink. I have a drink on the menu here at Gotham called The Second Wind, and it has Remy Martin 1738 cognac. There is some espresso. There's milk. There is a little Cardamaro and some Demerara syrup. So anytime you're pairing a drink with something sweet, you want the drink to probably be as sweet, if not sweeter, than the actual dessert, just to make a more harmonious pairing. So the Demerara syrup would help sweeten that up. The coffee and the cognac would lend a nice richness. That's probably what I'm doing.
So when you're on your own and you've got your beautiful Thanksgiving spread and you don't have to worry about pleasing customers and you don't have to worry about pleasing, picky relatives, what do you like to drink with your Thanksgiving food?
I make cocktails all day. It's kind of like a sommelier tasting wine all day. At the end of the day, they're like, okay, just give me a beer. So I'm kind of like the same. I do love having cocktails at home with dinner. But at this point, I would just say, give me a glass of wine or a beer.
Great. Well, thanks so much, and happy Thanksgiving.
I'm Dan Pucci. I'm a side director at Wassail, amongst many other things. Generally, I serve a bunch of magnums of cider. I buy them mostly from Eve's Cidery up in the Finger Lakes. Autumn and Ezra make really precise and clean and delicious ciders that are very food friendly. I also use them, mix them up with some kind of light, fresh, easy drinking wines as well, but kind of cider at the core, it's really awesome.
So do you like a drier cider or a sweeter cider or like a funkier cider? What do you think works best, or a variety?
I like having a variety out. I think one of cider's great things is that it is so diverse and very versatile. So we usually have a couple different things, usually some that are a little funkier, but more on the drier side for ciders for sure. Cider is so flexible. It's so kind of hits a lot of points. Cider is nearly never that loud, so it's always kind of like hits this kind of like soft-spoken middle tier where it can kind of like pair with a lot of different things and not get in the way of other things, so you can really enjoy all the delicious fall savory flavors to it, while at the same time it's not going to overwhelm your food. And cider is kind of like fairly high in acid, so we can kind of cleanse away all that kind of weight and heaviness of the food, while at the same time it's has some awesome like tannin to it and structure, so it adds a nice backbone to your food as well. You get all this acid balance of tannin with refreshment and lower alcohol, so it's a good endurance drink to kind of drink throughout the entire course of the meal, rather than having like one glass of red wine and being done.
Do you think that for people who are serving cider to their families who may not be as familiar with kind of the new breed of ciders where there's all this diversity, is there like any sort of script you can give them, or like a manual for this is how you tell your family that you're serving cider?
Yeah, I think it's about saying like, guys, just like pause, reset, like put all your expectations at the door for a second here, and we're gonna drink something new and different and unique. It's not gonna be what you've had before. It's gonna be something different, but yet accessible. there isn't really a huge barrier of entry, so I have a much easier time getting family excited about cider that comes from places like the Finger Lakes or from the Berkshires or from like Pennsylvania than I do talking about getting people excited about drinking like interesting wine from Croatia or Macedonia. And it's just a lot easier to talk about cider from somewhere they know and recognize from an apple.
Are you going to serve something different either as an aperitif or with dessert, or are you cider all the way through?
We usually mix it up. It's usually just a bunch of wine and beer in there as well. It's not strictly cider, just because it's usually a fairly large group. So it's usually mixed throughout. And for dessert, we usually always have some kind of ice cider or something sweet at the end of cider base. Because again, it's high acid, cleansing. It's not going to be too much or too heavy for your food, for the foods. Like last week, I had an awesome pairing of Eden's barrel aged ice cider from Vermont with some like pumpkin butternut squash mousse thing that was like really awesome. The like sweet herbiness of the mousse with like the kind of like sweet, like candied high acid thing of the ice cider, really good pairing.
And one more question, which is the day after, when you're having your Thanksgiving leftover sandwich, are you drinking something different then? Is that your opportunity to get a little weirder with it, a little funkier, or are you still going to go for something that's pretty clean, high acid?
Yeah, I think clean, high acid. Personally, I'm usually coming back on the train from New Jersey somewhere, so I'm usually enjoying the New Jersey Transit's lax alcohol policies on the train back to the city. Yeah, I think the same name goes for it. I even think something like that maybe it's a little more concentrated. You do something a little funkier even. I think something like bittersweet cider, like something from Oliver's in the UK, or even like from Black Duck here in the Finger Lakes. So there's a little more like funky bits to them. These ciders, a little more backbone, more tannin and richness, and a little bit lower acid. Are like great session ciders with a great kind of hearty sandwich. It's a really good bet.
Great, thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Nacho Monclus. I'm the general manager sommelier at Camperdown Elm. Usually when it's a big family reunion, mostly good values, because I suffer if I open wines that I've been keeping for a while. So I had a bad experience with natural wines when I, when it's a lot of people tasting, and when it's actually people older than 60, 70 year old, because they know those wines from before, from when they were young. And for them it's kind of funny to see that those wines are back. Like they are more used to, the modern style wines. In this case, for this year, I'm going to bring a bunch of wines from the Canary Islands. So these islands, first of all, they have been making wine for 1,000 years. They are the product of a lot of countries conquering these islands, like British, French, Italians. They are closer to Morocco than they are to Spain. Volcanic soils, microclimates, local grapes. So they have a lot of character. Because of the how the ocean influences the climate, the wines tend to be mild, medium body. They favor fruit over oak. Great acidity from these volcanic soils. So they pair very well with the turkey meat, the acidity from the cranberry, the sweetness, vegetable. They are very food friendly.
And what are you serving as an aperitif?
I would always recommend to serve something that you have a lot and kind of cheap. Like, let's calm down the thirst and then give them the good stuff. In this case, usually my brother-in-law brings beer. He has a small brewery, Brick and Feather, in Massachusetts. So we start always with beer and then move to wine. And, they do a lot of IPA, New American style.
And so this is interesting. We have the IPA that's very American, and then we have the wine from the Canary Islands that, reflects, like you were saying, all these different people who have conquered this land. And that also feels like kind of a reflection of what the holiday is, right? Or is that something intentional, or does it just kind of work out that way?
I don't know. The truth is, it's funny because my father-in-law, he's Hungarian. My mother-in-law is like Ukrainian, Polish, Jewish. And then another part of the family is Japanese. And then it's me from Spain. So, maybe makes some sense, right?
Yeah, so you've got all these global influences in your Thanksgiving, probably anyway. So in some families, Thanksgiving is all about having the same foods and the same wines. And if my family were like that and I wanted to serve them wine from the Canary Islands, do you have any kind of advice to what's my elevator pitch to them for why we're drinking a different wine this year than, the Pinot Noir that we always have?
I mean, at this point, my family, I'm in charge of the wine, basically. Everybody expects for me to bring the wine, and they know I always bring something new and fun. And at the end, they trust me, they taste the wine, they like it. I think they always have, my wines, but that time that I brought a lot of natural wines. My grandfather was like, this is the wine for peasants. It's like, this is the one that I used to drink until I make money. And it makes sense. I love natural wines. 85% of this list is biodynamic. But it makes sense. It's like the examples with food, when sweet breads. I love sweet breads. My father will tell me how they will throw the sweet breads for the pigs, So for them, it's like, it's different than it is for us, So in the case of the wines that I'm going to bring from Canary Islands, let's say I will bring friendly, I hate this word, but easy to drink wines. There are wines, let's say there's a few wineries. I like Suertes del Marqués. It's a winery that usually favors fruit over the minerality and the oak, great acidity. There are other wineries like Igneos, Orígenes, that one is actually really honest, and they saw these pyracine, super spicy wines. I'm not going to bring that wine, or maybe I will bring one bottle for me and my brother-in-law or something, So I will bring wines that are most like fruit, good acidity, easier than, than other more extreme experimental wines.
And my favorite part of Thanksgiving is the next day when all the family's gone and I have my leftovers and I can make my sandwich or my omelet or whatever I make with my Thanksgiving leftovers. What are you going to drink then when you're heating up your leftovers and you don't have to worry anymore about making anyone else happy but yourself?
Probably I usually do some lager with sparkling lemonade.
So it's like a shandy kind of.
Yeah, a shandy, exactly. Something that, how you say, hair the dog, wear the dog, but not too much, like half and half. Yeah, no, I'm not a very spirits person either, so no Bloody Marys. I almost prefer a virgin Bloody Mary with a little bit of Fino sherry. That's actually pretty good. Than vodka. We do here in Camperdonel, we do the Bloody Mary with Fino Innocente from Valdespino. Just a float. It's delicious.
I've never had a Bloody Mary with sherry. That sounds very good. No, I've got to drive home. All right, well, that's it from me. Thank you very much.
This podcast is produced by Large Media, L-A-R-J Media. Wine Enthusiast is made possible by grapes, sunshine, and wine, and by the hard-working editors who bring you news and information on your favorite beverage every day. If you like what we're doing, share our podcast with your friends and give us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. For more fun wine information, follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Wine Enthusiast.